I'm Linda Kincaid, live in Atlanta, ahead on CNN Newsroom.
Biden said it, and Zelensky said it, and I think that was one of the reasons, one of the starts of the war.
Donald Trump blames Joe Biden rather than Vladimir Putin for Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Let's see what happens. Nobody really knows what is going to happen.
The U.S. president doubles down on tariffs despite the risks of higher prices and a global trade war. And a show of force from Hamas has some inside Israel questioning their country's war strategy.
We refuse to understand it, we refuse to accept it, and we refuse to understand that we are fighting a different type of war.
Live from Atlanta, this is CNN Newsroom with Linda Kincaid.
We begin with Donald Trump refusing to acknowledge a basic truth about the fighting in Ukraine, that Russia started the war when it invaded its neighbor. The U.S. president, hosting India's prime minister at the White House, instead blamed his predecessor, Joe Biden, and Ukraine's ambition to join NATO. It's not a new position for Mr. Trump, and it echoes Moscow's own justification for what it calls its special military operation. The comments come after President Trump spoke with Russian leader Vladimir Putin on Wednesday, sparking concerns that Ukraine would be left out of negotiations to end the war. Here's the president's response.
It's too early to say what's going to happen. Maybe Russia will give up a lot, maybe they won't, and it's all dependent on what is going to happen. The negotiation really hasn't started. But I will say, as far as NATO is concerned, from many years before President Putin, I will tell you that I've heard that Russia would never accept that. And I think Ukraine knew that, because Ukraine wasn't in and never requested to be in until more recently. So that's the way it is, and I think that's the way it's going to have to be.
Well, more now from CNN's Jeff Zeleny reporting from the White House.
President Donald Trump on Thursday night here at the White House mounting an aggressive defense of Russia, not saying what concessions Vladimir Putin would have to make to end the Ukraine war, and not even acknowledging that it was Putin who indeed started the war some 3 years ago. Now, throughout the day, as this reset relations between the United States and Russia continues following that phone call on Wednesday between the two leaders, it is clear that Russia is back at the table. What is less clear, what role Ukraine will play in these peace negotiations. There's no question the president also is increasingly blaming his predecessor, Joe Biden, instead of Russia, for the Ukraine war. Take a listen.
Now, Russia's taken over a pretty big chunk of territory, and they also have said from day one, long before President Putin, they've said they cannot have Ukraine be in NATO. They said that very strongly. I actually think that that was the thing that caused the start of the war, and Biden said it, and Zelensky said it, and I think that was one of the reasons, one of the starts of the war.
And indeed, those comments are simply parroting many talking points from Moscow itself. So Trump clearly giving much latitude, much leeway here to Vladimir Putin. The questions are about Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine. What role will they have in the peace negotiations? Now, on Thursday, President Trump was asked directly if he trusts Vladimir Putin, and he said he trusts they want to make peace. There is no question here in these reset relations, even as President Trump is saying Russia should be allowed back into the G7, of course, the group of 7 nations they were expelled from more than a decade ago. That will be certainly controversial and unlikely in the near term. However, these reset relations making clear that President Trump, at least at this point, is siding with President Putin. Jeff Zeleny, CNN, the White House.
Mr. Trump is following through on his campaign trail threat to impose reciprocal eye-for-eye tariffs on all countries that send goods to the U.S. And the tariffs could take effect as early as April. This move could ignite a global trade war, and it is likely to further increase inflation, as new costs will likely get passed to consumers. The U.S. president said short-term price hikes were possible and warned Americans to be prepared for short-term pain. The new tariffs could hit developing countries like India particularly hard. President Trump singled out India as its Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the White House.
India's been, to us, just about the highest tariffed nation anywhere in the world. They've been very strong on tariffs, and I don't blame them necessarily, but it's a different way of doing business. It's very hard to sell into India because they have trade barriers, very strong tariffs.
Well, CNN's Will Ripley is tracking the Trump-Modi meeting live from Taipei. Good to see you, Will. So this is Modi's fourth. Modi is the fourth foreign leader to visit Donald Trump since his inauguration last month. And Trump called him a great leader, but said India had the world's highest tariffs and it was a difficult place to do business. How was that meeting and the threat of more tariffs being viewed in Asia?
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting because President Trump actually called Prime Minister Modi the tariff king in the past, and Prime Minister Modi went to Washington potentially expecting that this was going to happen and coming with a package of deliverables to bring to President Trump. And so you saw at that press conference, these two men who have now met a total of 8 times since 2017 had a very good rapport, friendly rapport. They were flattering each other with compliments. And Prime Minister Modi was going on, going on a list of items that just ticked the boxes of making President Trump pretty happy. Make India great again. MEGA plus MAGA equals mega. You know, the kind of branding language that President Trump certainly, resonates with him and he's impressed by. And then you have the nuts and bolts that Modi can actually walk away with as well. A commitment to work jointly on the F-35 program, to work together on things like artificial intelligence and something the Biden administration would not do, Linda, which is to provide India with oil and natural gas. The Biden administration put environmental restrictions on the sale of oil and natural gas, but we know that President Trump doesn't think that way and is happy to drill, and sell, potentially lowering oil prices globally, making the United States a very competitive supplier. The U.S. wants to be India's #1 supplier of oil and natural gas. And that's apparently, if we're reading into the details here, that's how Trump and Modi plan to make up the majority of this trade deficit. So in the end, Modi can go back and he can point to his domestic political colleagues, some items that he got on his wish list, because it really could have been a very sticky situation for him. I'm not sure if he would have known that President Trump was going to announce reciprocal tariffs just hours after Modi landed in Washington. Had they not been able to have that press conference and have a friendly deal to announce, the outcome of this visit could have been very different for the Indian Prime Minister, Linda.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Ripley, good to have you staying across it all for us. Thanks so much. Well, Sarah Sudwani is a political science professor at Pomona College. She joins us now from Los Angeles. Good to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So a great friend, how Trump described India and its leader, that certainly didn't stop him from threatening tariffs, saying essentially that he wants to even out the playing field. How would you describe relations right now between India and the U.S.? And do you think these countries will avoid a trade war?
Well, it's a great question, Linda. And, obviously Trump has been really shaking up the world order in the last month since he's taken office. And Modi's visit is an important one today. Modi, of course, represents an enormous nation, 1.5 billion people, and an enormous market as well, which is something clearly Trump, as well as Elon Musk, are very well aware of. Modi meeting with Elon Musk as well. This was an incredibly important visit. They have had very warm relations in the past, and certainly Modi wanted to maintain those warm relationships, but those trade negotiations are absolutely top of mind for President Trump. And of course, Modi has seen his aggressive stance towards Canada, towards Mexico, towards China, and didn't want to be the next one on the firing block.
Yeah, as you say, the tariff war extends far beyond India. Trump is vowing to reciprocate tariffs on every nation. He spoke about Europe and China as well. I just want to play some sound.
The European Union is very difficult for us, very, very difficult. They tax our companies at levels that nobody's ever seen before. They take advantage of a lot of things, so we're not happy about that. China, of course, is terrible, and we've never taken in 10 cents until I was president.
He says the U.S. didn't take in 10 cents from China until he became president. How much truth is there in that statement, and what can those regions expect going forward?
Well, Trump has been very clear that he wants to have this tariff retaliatory policy worldwide. So I mean, much to be seen in terms of to what extent he'll actually maintain that. For India's sake, it's the 10th largest trading partner with the United States, but it also is running a $45 billion surplus in India's favor. And we know that the way President Trump operates, he wants to make sure he's getting the best deal here. And at this point, he doesn't necessarily feel that that's the case, clearly. However, these retaliatory tariffs will come at a price for the American people. We will very likely end up seeing prices rise here in the United States with these tariffs.
And Sarah, I just want to turn to Russia now. Regarding Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Trump says he trusts Vladimir Putin, a former KGB spy, on the subject. He sought to point the finger of blame for that invasion at the former U.S. president. I just want to roll some more sound.
I believe that's the reason the war started, because Biden went out and said that they could join NATO, and he shouldn't have said that. As soon as he said that, I said, you know what? You're going to have a war now, and I was right about that.
Why doesn't Donald Trump want to blame the invasion on Putin?
This is unclear. This is a very, very clear separation from the long history that the United States has had as an adversary of Russia. Certainly, even when the war in Ukraine began, Democrats, Republicans all lined up behind and with support for Ukraine. And we can see President Trump really making an about face in this moment. So this is a real turn of events for the United States. It sounds like perhaps there's some sort of warming of relations between the United States and Russia, but this completely flies in the face of all of our diplomatic relations for quite some time in the past. And India plays an interesting role in all of this. India has long had a relationship with Russia. It's often been the ace in India's pocket when trying to negotiate anything with the United States as well. We can always go back to our relationship with Russia. That might be changing given this new warming towards Russia from the United States.
Yeah. And of course, Donald Trump says time and time again that this war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza would never have happened had he been in office. It's hard to play hypotheticals, but could he have prevented either of these?
It's highly unlikely that the president could have prevented them. You know, there were a number of different world events that were taking place in the case of Israel and Palestine. Of course, we saw October 7th happen that ultimately started much of this conflict. In the war in Ukraine, we saw Russia advancing towards Ukraine. It's unclear exactly what it would have been that Trump would have done had he been president in order to change the outcome of these conflicts abroad.